So this time it's Cardiff, the capital of Wales. And the amazing thing about Cardiff is that at the beginning of the last century, there were only 1,000 people living here. Just a little fishing village. The beginning of this century, 170,000 people. I know. And the reason for that development, three things: the Butte family, the docks, and a little thing called coal. Now, we're on a light ship. When it was last working, it used to be on the Helwick Sands, crew of 7, 550 tons. You could see its light for 25 miles. Nowadays, it's a centre for Christianity. Don't do that. It's here that people come to lose the stress of working in the offices around. Drop in for a cup of coffee and a chat. What does this ship not have? Plastic chairs. No, it actually has quite a few of those. An engine. It doesn't have an engine. Now, you can't hear the engine, you can hear a generator to power the light. It's towed wherever it goes, so we're not going to get very far, are we? What? You're going to go ahead rowing. And what are you going to use to row with? Shall we just go and see Cardiff? So, the story of Cardiff and its amazing growth. Where does it all begin? Well, it begins in Merthyr Tydfil. It's true, actually. Merthyr Tydfil was by far Wales' biggest town, stuffed full of coal and iron, great wealth. Along comes the Butte family. They were the lords of the manor of Cardiff. They had an idea: build a canal between Merthyr Tydfil and Cardiff, export the coal and iron. That was in 1794. That's what they did. Then along came the second Marquis of Butte from the Butte family. He's known as the father of Cardiff, a shrewd businessman. He said, we ought to build the docks in Cardiff so you can take the coal and iron off the canal boats and put it onto the seafaring boats. Brilliant! You have to imagine this bit. Better still, he came up with a ruling that all coal and all iron that came into Cardiff had to go through the family docks. Result, enormous wealth. 1896, this became the Butte Docks Company headquarters. Get used to the name Butte, you're going to be hearing it a lot. You see, I told you, with the building of the docks, labour had to be brought in from all over the world, particularly from Ireland, people escaping the potato famine. A lot of them actually wanted to settle down here, but they had nowhere to live. The Marquis of Butte had a brilliant idea. He built Butte Town, and the people did live in it. It was a really cosmopolitan place, and in fact it still is today. In the 1860s it became known as Tiger Bay, and it was made even more famous because Shirley Bassey was born here. The Buttes have left the mark all over the place. Butte Street, Butte Town, Butte Docks, Butte Park, Butte. This was Mount Stewart Square. Why Mount Stewart? Well, because that was another title that the Buttes had, the Mount Stewarts. It was originally a residential area for well-to-do people connected with the docks, but in 1884 it opened as the Coal Exchange. You see, all of the exchanging, the buying and selling, transporting, shipping, whatever, used to be done at the pier head, or if it was raining, in pubs. So they decided to make it official and put it in this exchange. It's said that the first $1 million deal done anywhere in the world was done in here. Fantastic hall. But it's been shut for some time. I'll find another way in. Tempus fugit, time flies, and I bet it did here. This floor controlled the world's economy. Step onto it to make a deal. You could touch a millionaire in any direction. What? A bag of coal. You want to exchange it for money? I don't think so, pal. I tell you what, more likely a sticky lolly. Is that good? Try undoing it with one hand. It's not that easy. 1871, they were doing about 2 million tons of coal here. The big peak, though, was 1913, when they did 10.5 million tons of coal in 1 year. How did you do that? Anyway, there came the Depression and coal exports slumped. 1958, this place closed down. And that's it, really. I can't tell what you're saying. You've got the lolly in you. No, give it. Now, what were you saying? Well, the next place is to do with Cardiff's history, but not to do with coal. This is Cardiff's most famous landmark, Cardiff Castle. It's actually 3 castles. There's a Victorian fairy tale castle, there's a Norman keep, and a Roman fort. Yes! The Romans came to the area about AD 50. They beat a local Celtic tribe called the Silurs, and they gave Cardiff its name, Caerleon, a fort on the river Taff. I don't know how it becomes daft, but anyway, Cardiff came out of that. AD 70, they started to build a permanent fort, and they controlled the whole of Wales. This is it, just as the Romans built it, left the same as the day a Roman hand put that brick on top of... Yeah, all right, so it's had quite a lot built on top of it since. It's still Roman. Let's do the Normans. William the Conqueror said to the knights that followed him, look, you can have Wales as long as you can subdue the locals. And one of them, Robert, Lord of Gloucester, took him at his word and took on the Prince of Glamorgan. He beat him and then thought, right, I'll have Cardiff because it's a really good port and there's a Roman fort there where I can build my own motte and bailey. Moat and the bailey behind me, the Norman keep. It's where the Lord and his family lived, but it was also a jail, and they kept in there Robert, the Duke of Normandy, eldest son of William the Conqueror, who'd got a bit too big for his boots and was locked up by his brother for 11 years until he became a vicar. No, he died in there. Section in the castle's history involves the Marquesses of Butte. The third Marquess inherited the castle when he was just a kid, and when he was 18 he had this wall built with all the various animals staring over the top. He and an architect called William Burgess spent millions and millions of his pounds, because he was one of the richest men in Europe, on doing all sorts of work on the castle, like for example that lot. You should see the inside. We're now in the clock tower. In fact, we're above the clock itself, and the whole of this tower is one giant bachelor's pad. You've got a winter smoking room downstairs, then the Marquess's bedroom, and a summer smoking room here, which is one of the most extraordinary rooms in the whole of Britain. You've got 8 different winds depicted holding up each corner of the room, and I reckon that the theme here is love throughout the seasons, because there's Cupid, and this is, in summer, my love grows greener. Unreal room. Lord Butte's bedroom. Beautifully elaborate, in fact, insane. Look at that. 189 mirrors on the ceiling, all reflecting his name, John, in Greek, and then his name, Saint John the Baptist, done in bronze with emeralds and rubies inlaid into his chest, and then the bathing area through here. Chaucer's mermaid is depicted in the sink, a lovely deep bath surrounded by 60 different types of marble with the name written in gold. So that's black and gold, turkey red, Derbyshire fossil, to name but 3. The The Marquis had 4 kids, and this is their day nursery. Lovely stories told in tiles all the way around. Robinson Crusoe there, Sleeping Beauty, Little Red Riding Hood, Robin Hood with Maid Marian, and a lovely sort of Victorian idea here. You've got Lady Fame, who's sitting above her heralder here, who's blowing her trumpet. But if you blow it too much, you end up with ass's ears. She's got, I haven't got ass's ears. He may have been the richest man in Europe, but he wanted to make his kids humble. The National Assembly for Wales. Hey, this is where the Assembly assembles. What happened was, 1997, the people of Wales voted to have an assembly. I'll explain that later. 1998, Parliament passed the Government of Wales Act. 1st of July 1999, they assembled in here. I'll show you where they do assemble. It has to be said, it's rather impressive, isn't it? Look at all that high-tech stuff. It is an assembly, not a government. It's taken on the roles of the Secretary of State for Wales, but it can't make new laws. Unlike Scotland, where they can, Wales will have to have the same laws as England and Northern Ireland. There are 60 members. The main member is the First Secretary, who sits either to the left or the right of the big chair in the middle, and the big chair is occupied by the overseeing officer. And that's basically the same as the Speaker in the Houses of Parliament. The Queen said, let's hope that this is a bridge to the future, so that this noble land can have a more democratic voice. I agree. Now we're going to go to somewhere where they had a slightly different approach to ruling a land. Now, I know we've come out of Cardiff. In fact, we're near to Newport. This is Caerleon. But it's important because it's Roman, and we needed some Roman in the... We did, come on. Caerleon is actually how the Welsh pronounced Castra Legionum, which means fort for the legion. There were only 3 legionary bases in England, here, Chester, and York. Here because they met fierce resistance from the local tribe, the Silures. They had a huge army based here. These are the barracks, the only surviving barracks in the whole of the British Isles. What's the matter? Weren't they a bit drafty? No, they were a bit taller than that, and they probably had wooden tops, and they had red slated roofs and greenish windows. There were 60 barracks in all here, a huge army. They did eventually win, and things settled down. You can see here against the old walls of the fort, the ovens where they used to cook. Earth walls at first, with wood on top, replaced by stone, now returned to earth. Now, they weren't always fighting. They actually had some fun as well. Every self-respecting legionary soldier would expect to be given an amphitheatre for entertainment as part of his everyday life. And the soldiers of Caerleon were no exception. They had to build it themselves, but boy, did they build a beauty. Look at that! It's amazing. 5,000 people sitting here, watching the goings-on, you know. There'd be fighting with a wild animal, there'd be gladiatorial stuff, killing one another, there'd be the odd execution, military marching, archery displays, you name it, all happening in there, and usually associated with the spillage of blood. All in the name of sport. Now, it was built in AD 90, which probably means that the Silures had been defeated by then, because it's on the outside of the city walls. You can see the city walls just over there. Good, clean fun. But they had another way of celebrating. Blimey, all of a sudden we're in southern France. Or is it Australia? or South Africa, or California. We're in Wales, you Burke. We're in Llanech, which is just outside Cardiff. It is a vineyard, and a very successful little vineyard as well. They make a very precious wine. I'll tell you about that in a minute. First of all, some history for you. The Romans brought vines to England because they wanted a fresh supply of vino, and they were very, very good at it. The Normans were very, very good at it as well. They used to make it in all the monasteries. And for 300 years, we were producing fab wine until Henry VIII smashed all the monasteries up and the vines died. We lost the art. One or two people are now having another bash. This is Cariad, which is Welsh for precious. It's won a bronze award, this. And because it's precious, I'm going to take it home and look after it. You've got some. It's for us to share. What, half each? Fabulous. You've drunk it all. Your half was at the bottom. Castell Coch, the Red Castle, just outside Cardiff, guarding the Taff. There was a castle here in the 12th century. There was a castle here in the 13th century. In the 15th century, they fell into disrepair. And guess who eventually bought them? Come on, guess. The Romans. No, the Marquis of Butte bought them. The third Marquis. Make another fairy tale castle. Him and Burgess. They set about it in 1875. Although they didn't finish it until 1891. I wouldn't mess with that because it's a real drawbridge. It really works. Yes. They actually finished it 10 years after Burgess's death. The Marquis's wife said that Burgess was a very ugly man that made very beautiful things. And I think that's probably right. Excuse me, can we squeeze through? Thank you. Now, spending all of that money on building this castle, what do you think he used it for? Nothing. He did actually plant some vines here, and he made a Riesling wine, which was so dreadful that Punch magazine did a cartoon about it, and they said you need 4 men per bottle. 1 victim, 2 people to hold the victim down, and 1 to pour it down his neck. That's how dreadful it was. He also used it for locking up his kids when they had infectious diseases. That's not nice. It's not nice. He may have spent a fortune on it. It may be very odd, but it's also very beautiful and elaborately decorated on the inside. And talking of things grand, what about the Civic Centre? And a Civic Centre grand enough for any European capital. But the interesting thing about this area, known as Cathays Park, is it was started to be built in 1904, 51 years before Cardiff became the capital of Wales. Spooky or what? Do you think it had anything to do with changing the capital to Cardiff? No, nor do I. In the 17th century, this place was allotments. Little rows of peas and potatoes all over the place here. And then in the 18th century, it became farms, one called Cathays and one called Dobbin Pits. Is that Brad Pitt's horse? Struth. No, it's probably from the 15th century expression, daubing pits, where townspeople went to get clay to daub the houses. Ah, now you're understanding. 1815, all of this land was bought by, guess who? A beautiful market. You're getting better, aren't you? The Marquis of Butte, yes. And they kept it for the best part of 100 years until eventually the third Marquis sold it to the council for about 160 grand with a few conditions. They had to be civic buildings, he had to leave the trees alone, and the roads had to be grand. Well, I think they did all of that. 1900, the Marquis died and severed all of the connections really with the Butte family, except that the present day Marquis has business connections here. Right, there you go. Do you fancy a grand church? Good. Now, if you're going to have a new capital, and Cardiff is a new capital, 1955, you need an old religious centre. And Cardiff has one of the oldest, Cardiff Cathedral. This is it. Absolutely stunning. It means camp on the Taff. This is a little hollow just by the River Taff. Why does daff always become taff? I don't understand it. It's better than becoming daft. Well, you should know, shouldn't you? There's been religion in this little hollow since the 6th century. They had a monastery here, so who knows? It was an ecclesiastical village that was separate from Cardiff, but it's been joined by Cathedral Road now. In 1120, the Normans decided to turn the little church that was here into an enormous cathedral because this was the centre for Christian worship in the whole of South Wales. They did that. The Civil War, Oliver Cromwell's boys came along and smashed it to bits. Turned it into an alehouse and a shelter for their animals. I know. 18th century, it was derelict. 19th century, they started to rebuild it. It is stunning. Do a few pictures and then it's boaty boaty, floaty floaty, nighty nighty. Well, isn't this nice? The Balmoral, 50 years old this year. She is built to do a ferry service between Southampton and the Isle of Wight. She used to have a car deck on her, you know. She spent some time in Dundee where she was a floating pub. But this company got hold of her and started to restore her. But in order to do that, they had to spend £350,000. But they did it. She's now circumnavigating England. Lovely little tours. Do you know how many she carries? 691. Do you know how many are on board? 692. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Off you go.